Hello, welcome back. Now we're going to go over Chapter 6 by Min Zhou, titled Chinese American Language Media in the United States. Welcome. So before I start on media, I like to actually look at different media forms. And actually, if you have Facebook, if you have Twitter, actually there's lots of new kind of multimedia, particularly for the Chinese and the diasporic Chinese. Remember, 1 in 5, actually over 1 in 5 people on the planet is Chinese. So they're blogging like crazy. They don't have Twitter, but they have like Weibo, they have Baidu, and so they have like really intense Twitter. They take it to the next. They're like very famous for blogging, and unlike us, who when we blog about, we're going to have, scissors tonight. Sometimes they'll blog about democracy struggle now in Hong Kong. So I was looking at their Twitter feeds, like, oh my God, okay, people. I tweet about my food, okay, but they tweet about democracy in Hong Kong, okay. So actually, let's look around. Of course, because of the large global population of Chinese, there's just so much intersection of Chinese people around the world, okay? So one of my friends, actually, she started a website called bigbadchinesemama.com. And actually, if you Google Asian doll, or if you Google Asian woman, and in previous lectures we talked about how there are like these persistent stereotypes of Asians as the nerd, the dragon lady, the model minority, the pollutant, the yellow peril, etc., right? She noticed that actually a lot of times when you Google these websites, you actually get porn sites, and also you get these like mail order sites, right? So she's a feminist, she's an Asian American activist, so she thought, you know what, all these like creepy dudes all over the internet, all over the globe, right? They're like trying to buy some Asian woman, right, in some like unequal, oppressive task. So she's like, well, you know what? Why don't I create a website, right? And so these guys around this world who want to do these, dubious things to Asian women, why don't I get my friends to go on this website and also depict them? So this is actually Christina Cheryl Wong's website. It's called bigbadchinesemama.com. And what she did is, and when she was writing her website, she put all the different kind of bleeper words for like the dirty words. So actually at one point this was like the third most visited website for like Asian kind of I guess bad things, okay? So she got a lot of actually hits, okay? So it's not just a website, but it's a website that was seen by a lot of people, and again, a lot of males who were probably not feminists, not Asian American activists. So let's go to her website. All right, so here, let's read it. If you're home, you can read it by yourself. Here you'll find, quote, demure lotus blossoms, quote, the geishas, and, quote, the oriental sluts, whatever you had imagined in your patriarchal colonialist longings. These women will take you by storm, and in the parentheses it says, and will kick your ass. Yay, you've seen mail order bride sites before, but you've never, and you may have even surfed these Asian porn sites, but you've never, in your wildest culturally commodifying sexual desires, have you been schooled by women and choose the Y for women like this, okay? All right, so it says, go ahead, Mr. Smarty Pants, check us out. We are, after all, Orientals, known for our hospitality and genteel demeanor, okay? We aim to please. All right, so guys, let's go, and I'm talking to you, gentlemen out there who are on this site. I don't know if you've ever been on these sites yourself, okay? Ladies, I'm going to assume some of you haven't, okay? But let's go to these women that you can actually, that you can marry, okay? Let's go to the first one. Bangkok Bang Bang, okay? So here it says, hi, me Bangkok Bang Bang, I really demure, okay? So it says here, you see these Asian women choking this guy, okay? By the way, these are all UCLA students, okay? And they're just doing this as an activist kind of event. So here they say, I want them obese so they can run away when I want money. I want them bald so the light reflection will signal when I call them for child support. I want them so hairy they are less slippery when I grab them and drag them to the immigration center. Okay, so that is one Asian woman that you can marry. Okay, gentlemen out there. Let's go to another one. Let's see, which one is your fancy? Okay, okay, let's just go Shinobu. Okay, or is it Shinobu? Okay. So her nationality is Axis of Powers, War II, flashback nightmares, half-breed, okay. Occupation, like you care. Yes, I do. Have you a problem with that? Okay. So again, you can see that there's, this is actually, if you ever want to go to these website yourself, it's just Big Bad Chinese Mama, bigbadchinesemama.com, Christina Xiao Wang, okay. Frequently unasked questions. Why are your brides wearing any of those Chinese dresses or kimonos? All the other mail order sites have women wearing them. And even those fighting pictures, you could have at least put one of them in a kung fu outfit. Those really turn me on. And again, there's actually, these are real actual responses to her website. And to one point, actually, she had a lot of KKK members like emailing her and saying, no, it's true. You know, Asians are like this. Okay, so it's kind of her snarky response, right? All right, so actually, really, these are real, actual responses that she got on her website. Will my bride make an easy adjustment from her Asian culture to liberal American lifestyle? Okay, so again, you know, some of the people actually thought they were real, actual brides. These are actually just UCLA students just trying to crack a joke on these nefarious guys who want to kind of order a woman. So pretty interesting, and she actually gets into a kind of a argument with these I had a KKK member apparently, where he says no, it's true, and it's pretty funny. So that's interesting. So okay, so that is actually a good introduction to our Asian media. So you can see how Asian Americans have put themselves on the internet, and we, in our previous lectures, we talk about how the Fung brothers are very, they kind of mentioned that Asian Americans are very represented on the internet, right? Key, because sometimes they're blocked out in Hollywood, but not in Asia, of course, okay? So that's a great opener for Chapter 6, Chinese American Language Media in the United States. All right. Chinese language media, newspapers, magazines, radios are the pillars of Chinese diaspora communities. So you're probably asking, well, we have like 1 in 5 people on earth are Chinese, or actually more. You have these millions of Chinese people all over the world in over 150 countries. We have millions in America. It's one of the largest Asian American groups in America. How do they actually interact? How do they know information? Well, magazines, newspapers, radios, websites. Actually, one of my students who took this class last year actually was just basically astounded in the class, but she was actually just typing these Chinese characters, and there was these websites called Chinese in LA, Chinese in San Diego, Chinese in San Jose. So they're basically websites all about the city and what you can do there and where do you go for any information, but all in Chinese, right? So that's something that a lot of people don't know about, that, you know, definitely here in LA, we have, you know, dozens and dozens of newspapers, but also websites that are catered to Chinese in here, right? And again, not just Chinese from China, but Chinese from all the different parts of the global world. So we have Spanish. We have Spanish websites for the Chinese who read in Spanish. You definitely can see this in the Korean community. There's so many Korean diasporic who actually come here from Peru or Ecuador, and they're Spanish newspapers, but they're aimed towards the Koreans. Now again, I want you guys to think, I guess you're sitting in front of your computer, so do you know of any kind of internet sites that are well served by Chinese, right? Well, they're all over the internet, right? Weibo, you have CCTV, there's so many different, China is like a massive like blogging. Although if you have Facebook, Facebook is blocked in China. It's like kind of the bamboo wall, they call it. It was really difficult. No one can get into Facebook. I've heard people can do it, but I was in China. I couldn't do it. Several people were really frustrated. They're running back to Hong Kong because Facebook is legal in Hong Kong. But even if you use a dummy addresses, or you reroute like several places all the world, you still couldn't get into Facebook. But apparently some people can. So again, don't think of Chinese people as passive, right? Because it is, yes, it is definitely blocked, and Facebook is officially blocked, and Google is censored. But you know, there's always people that are trying to go around that, and they get found out, and they go another around that. So think of that way, that it's 1.3 billion, and of course the millions of diasporic, including the United States, they're constantly blogging about China and the global world. Okay, all right. So the largest U.S. Chinese newspapers. Let's go through this. So we have Chinese newspapers. We have the Chinese Daily News. We have Sentao. We have China Press. Okay, so you might have known these newspapers. They kind of they highlight little feats that there's always that 8-year-old kid that went to Harvard is always in there. And I remember I was actually in here when I was in high school and also in college. So it's really interesting. It kind of shows all these things of Chinese American life, right? So I think I've been teaching this for a while. So I think I did some festival thing and they interviewed me. It was really unusual. But anyway, so Min Zhao, she asked a really intriguing question, and she asks, do Chinese media, does it inhibit or does it promote adaptation of Chinese immigrants into American society? So remember, we have this like discourse now, and the discourse is that, these immigrants, they don't know English and they should learn English, and if they learn English, they'll be more incorporated, they'll be more assimilated. They got to learn English, right? So Min Zhao asked this like really intriguing question, and we've had this debate in California for such a long time. So does this Chinese media that is in Chinese, does it inhibit Chinese immigrants from American society, or is it promote it so they are more assimilated into American society? And the answer is, so Min Zhao actually is the chair at UCLA in the Asian American Studies Department, and she argues that the media actually helps immigrants in the new society to connect to the places of origin, okay? But also it's a roadmap to the new society, right? So again, this goes against the discourse of you have to learn English, right? In some cases, right, if you're a Chinese worker, you don't really have time sometimes to take these ESL classes. You're just trying to make ends meet, particularly if you're undocumented, right? We have lots of large Asian undocumented, including Chinese, and sometimes you just don't have enough time to learn English because you're just barely surviving. And so Min Zhao argues that, these websites in these native like Chinese characters actually helps people get more involved in the community. These websites are just like everything. It talks about where you can get food, where you can get help for immigration, but also it talks about the various news items like that's happening in China, but also in LA, right? Because there is a Chinese in LA website that's everything about LA. So again, she argues that these medias really help immigrants become more accustomed to the new society. So let's actually contrast the old Chinese to the new Chinese. The old Chinese, when did they come? So that if you took my EWS 204 class, the old Chinese came in 1848, and they came to the Gold Mountain, and for the gold rush. And what jobs did they do other than mining? Choo-choo. All right, so I think you guys probably know that actually they were railroad workers, right? Most of them were illiterate. Most of them had very little education. So I want to ask you guys a question, and I want you guys to mentally answer this. Was past newspapers in America, Chinese newspapers, were they important? Were they powerful? Were they big social organizing features? If most of the Chinese back in the day were illiterate, uneducated? Let's think. So Min Zhao argues that there actually wasn't that important back in the day. There were newspapers back then, Chinese newspapers in the 1800s, particularly in LA and California. But, if most people can't read the newspaper, then it wasn't as effective, right? And also, I think the Chinese back then, the male bachelor society, had an intention of going back to China, right? That was a big issue, right? So they're not wanting to incorporate into the U.S. society. Some were stuck here because of sort of xenophobic laws, and also economics, but their intention always was to go back to China, okay? But nowadays, after the 1965 Act or the Hart-Celler Act, the Chinese who come here are actually much more literate, much more skilled, and actually, in fact, over 65% of all Chinese have a bachelor's degree, right? Obviously, within that, there's actually people who have PhDs and masters as well, right? So again, there's a huge difference between Chinese in the past, Chinese now, right? Also, there's actually a complexity difference, right? Chinese of the past came from Guangdong, Canton, China. The Chinese of current are coming from these 150 countries, right? From all these world, they're double immigrants, right? So they're coming from Hong Kong, they're coming from Malaysia, they're coming from Taiwan, Vietnam, Cambodia, they're coming from France, they're coming from Australia, they're coming from New Zealand. They're double, triple, quadruple migrants at this point, right? And so again, it's really difficult for these Chinese newspapers to kind of compensate for all this diversity, but they do, and it's actually a really great job that they do, kind of accommodate all these different types of Chinese people from around the world. All right, so let's look at the current newspapers, what they have to do. Well, you got to cater to a very diverse group of Chinese, like very well educated at the PhD level and very not working class, okay? Also, the current newspapers, they have to lift a lot, right? You're talking about Chinese from all over the world migrating to the United States. So you're talking about a lot of, you always have to write about culture or write about the current events from those primary cultures. So again, that is huge. That's a heavy lifting. All right, so current newspapers it's actually for literate people who actually can read it, right? So that's also a big thing, okay? Also, a lot of the people who read it have college degrees, right? And that's very different from who could not read from the original Chinese who came, okay? Remember, these newspapers also have to accommodate undocumented, and we have a lot of undocumented, actually, Chinese in America as well. And so you have to accommodate that level and that difference, okay? And it's really interesting if you're looking at Chinese characters. Chinese characters are traditional, and most of the diaspora who left earlier from China actually use traditional characters. But nowadays, China uses modern characters, Putonghua, which is like simplified characters. Again, this is really different from what people, the diaspora learned, right? And so those new elite millionaire Chinese are forced to read these traditional characters that was kind of out of fashion in China for like a long time, right? So it's unreadable for some. So you see all this heavy lifting that these current Chinese newspapers have to compensate for. Also, the current Chinese newspapers have to compensate for the transnational nature of the Chinese. So there are these elite Chinese who just go back and forth from China to U.S., Hong Kong, U.S., Malaysia to U.S., right? So you're constantly having to give information about 2 or 3 countries that people are constantly, they call them the astronauts, going here and there, okay? And there is really a huge difference within the Chinese community in terms of education, right? Immigrants from Taiwan are just so much more educated, right, than immigrants from Hong Kong and mainland China, right? And it really depends on the migration that you came, right? So the current migrants from Taiwan, they actually have, a lot of them have master's degrees, right, or PhDs. And if you look at the migrants from mainland China currently, or the migrants from Hong Kong that came in the 1970s, 80s, you're talking about a high school background. So again, these newspapers have to compensate for all these different disparate groups. So really intriguing. I actually interviewed a reporter once, and who actually has been a reporter in the United States for ethnic news for over 20 years, and the man speaks like 6 languages, like 6 Chinese dialects. It's just like so much harder. I mean, of course, his English was perfect, but he had to speak like 6 different dialects of Chinese, and that was just the norm. He said that a lot of the journalists had to speak all these different languages. So imagine the heavy lifting of versus just if you just report English, okay. All right, so another thing that I want to talk about is a Tiananmen Square, okay? So in 1989, we had a huge influx of Tiananmen Square refugees, okay? So I'm going to show this, and I'm going to end, one more slide after this, I'm going to end it. And something that has actually very much galvanized Chinese America and Chinese diaspora is the Tiananmen Square Massacre, okay? So there's a process that happened in Tiananmen Square, and it had pretty bad, disastrous effects. So let's watch a clip of that.
一切都没发生过。历史事件的含义不会自动呈现出来，而总是由人来解释的。6月5日清晨的这一瞬间将成为永恒的历史象征。后来他消失在人群中，下落不明，连姓名都难以确认。对于全世界千百万的电视观众来说， 这一时刻的含义非常清楚，这是人类良知与勇气在向无情的国家机器挑战。中国政府对这一场面的解释同样简单，只是截然相反。
稍有常识的人都会看出，如果我们的铁骑继续前进，这个螳臂挡车的歹徒难道能够阻挡得了吗？摄像机拍下的这个画面，同西方某些国家的宣传恰恰相反，正好说明了我们的军队。
Seen during the Tiananmen Square protests that happened, and it was a democracy movement, and that short scene I know is extremely heartbreaking for large segments of the human earth, right? Because for the diaspora that were watching that was heartbreaking actually, and I know when those were happening. When I was doing my interviews, actually I was like elementary, but as an adult, I was casually interviewing people about this event, and all over the world, people in Paris, people in Vietnam, people in China, not China because it's censored, but people in the United States, undocumented, they all came out and they watched this, and it was heartbreaking, like what happened. They tried to, this actual gentleman that stopped in front of the tank has never been found again, and again, particularly places like Hong Kong, they do their own commemoration of this event, and it's huge. It's and again, this is all very much actually a part of Chinese media, and this is something that a Chinese media would actually report on because it is something that is happening in China, but it's interesting. It's banned in China and it's very censored in China, but a good example of Chinese media and how it's very much affected by what happens in China. Okay, so we're going to take a break after this, and so here I want to just point out this picture. Hong Kong is the only place on the planet that actually commemorates the Tiananmen Square Massacre. So after the tanks came and they let the guy free, but later he has never been found. It's been many years, and so actually Hong Kong has a yearly commemoration for the Tiananmen Square Massacre, and also they have a pro-democracy movement. And so again, it's like I don't want you to think of China as one thing, as a simple kind of the simplistic argument, the Samuel Huntington East versus West or something, like so simple, right? And in reality, there's like lots of discourse in China, lots of blogging, lots of dissent, and lots of people going for some part of. They have some people advocating for their own rights, and for some, it's voting. Okay, so again, this is huge, and this is all covered by Chinese media. So there's something very intimate about that. That there's Chinese newspapers that report about Chinese all over the world, like whatever's happening to Chinese people all over the world, and so you get that in Chinese newspapers, right? And that promotes ethnic identity for sure, right? If you're watching co-ethnics being run over by a tank, that's and you're indignant, but you love China, right? That's your ancestral home. How is that going to make you feel, right? China is an unusual place. Like unlike some people who are exiles, right? They're exiles from their country, and they vow never to go back. Like sometimes of some Cubans, I vow never to go back if Castro is there. This is not the case for Chinese ethnic identity, right? For a lot of Chinese people, you may disagree with the government for whatever reason, or you might agree with the government for whatever reason, but you never not go to China, right? It is your home in many ways, right? And so, again, this is something that is very complex for ethnic identity, and it's particularly very interesting if you look at how the media covers all of Chinese diaspora, okay? All right, so let's take a break after this. I just want to mention that Cantonese is the diasporic language, okay? There are hundreds of local dialects in China, but Mandarin is actually the official one. But in the newspapers and Chinese newspapers, it is actually a lot of Cantonese background journalists. So I'd like you to note that is in itself a very different from other kind of ethnic newspapers, that the language is actually not the dominant language in China, okay? So Cantonese, so a minority language. All right, great, and I'll see you soon after our break.